Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, a new kind of podcast where no topic is off limits. We're bringing in experts and owners to have the conversations we should be having as a dog community. Each week, a new guest will share firsthand experiences, educational resources, or professional guidance to help you learn and grow along with your dog. You won't get one perspective here, you'll get them all, because every dog is different and every owner is too.
You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk, or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms.
This episode is sponsored by Pet Matrix Premium Canine Supplements. Straight Up Dog Talk is super excited to be partnered with Pet Matrix. After exhausting several other pet supplemental brands, I am now seeing the results that I have always been searching for Toby and Fitz. Pet Matrix supports all three pillars of canine wellness using their cell matrix delivery. It delivers nutrition directly into the cell. If you're looking for a supplement that pairs with nature and science, look no further and get your dog on Pet Matrix today.
Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. I'm Em. I'm flying solo this week, but I do have a very special guest, Mark from Rosewood Canine, with me tonight. How are you doing, Mark?
Good. What's up? How you doing?
Good. I'm super excited to have you here. Been following you for a while. We both have a friend in common, Tanisha from Pet Matrix, and she kind of introduced us. And we've been chatting a little bit. I've been following your training for a while now, and I thought that it was really important to share you and your training methods with our listeners, because I know that there are a lot of people in your area of the world who are looking for good trainers, and you do some pretty specific stuff. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, and a little bit more about your training.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me. What's up, everybody? Mark out here, Rosewood Canine. Shout out to Puffs Vanessa. Shout out to Sarah SG Canine. Shout out to Smokey, Doggone Decoy. So we're over here on the west side of Los Angeles, right by Venice Beach and Santa Monica. We're doing basic obedience, advanced off-leash training, rehabilitation. We work with a lot of rescues.
That's incredible. Especially the working with rescue part. I don't think that there are enough trainers out there that volunteer time to rescues. So I really commend you guys for doing that, because it makes dogs more adoptable. It makes them more home friendly. And it really helps people have just even the basic obedience skills for a dog coming into their home can be so helpful, especially to new pet owners. So what originally drew you to training dogs?
Well, I got my first gig to start working with dogs over at Tuwag there in Santa Monica back in 2017. Originally growing up with dogs, I'm a pit bull guy. I've owned pit bulls my whole life. I'm just very new to the Belgian Malinois. My sister has pit bulls, so we train them, do some basic stuff. All my pits have really been rescues. Then we'll find them here and there, or somebody will give it to us. My first start working with dogs on a professional level, 2017 at Tuwag working at a daycare.
Wow, what was that like?
The daycare was pretty cool in the beginning. It was really dead. We had around 15 dogs. The manager before was busy with other things, so I kind of, like me and another guy named Wayne, ended up running the place. Fast forward, when that person was relieved of the job or told to get another job, I jumped at the manager position just because I saw that I had a shot and I knew I could do it because I was doing it already. But one thing is, like, I knew that with daycare came the knowledge about dogs, dog behavior, and of course the control of the behavior, shaping behavior means you gotta know how to dog train.
Yeah, you do.
So that's when I took it upon myself. It's a failing business, and now I'm a manager. All the professionals before me weren't able to build it up the way it was supposed to. So this is like 2018 or 2019 now. All right, so 2 years later. I took it upon myself to learn more about dogs, and that's when I found Universal Class. It was the only college that I could really afford. Nobody would sponsor me, and so I got a credit card and I paid for it myself. The knowledge that I started to do, the teachers reviewing my work and giving me, really good feedback on my intelligence, and also I learned all positive in that class. But I told them about a balanced approach, and she still gave me a good grade, and she also agreed with the feedback, because sometimes it's not all positive. As we started to get more dogs in, even with 15 dogs in 1,000 square foot area, small dogs, we would have dog fights. And it's like, how do we have such a small amount of dogs with 4 staff members and they're fighting? So if we're going to grow the business, we can't have dogs fighting, and they're all good dogs. They pass the temperament test, but for some reason, it's because we found out that overexcitement can lead to aggression. And so how are we going to stop these dogs from getting overexcited? And, one thing is like removing the dog from the situation, but you can't really train that through punishment, especially if you want to keep building the dogs and having them flourish. So what I started learning is like a conditioning process where we use the slip lead. It was easier to kind of pull the dog away from the other dog as they started to get overexcited, and we knew the dogs that needed the slip leads, and we guide them to the place bed, and then we'll tell them good. And we did it very gently. But over and over, as the weeks passed, we noticed that the dogs start to take themselves out of play and rest on the place bed. And I was telling, I had workers there, a guy named Danny, a guy named Michael, Wayne, Adrian, Justin. And I was like, look, the dog's taking himself out of play and they're relaxing. So as we started seeing this, I got excited about, we did that. There's no way that this is happening without our part in this. So I start talking to the people that are coming in. We grew that daycare and increased their business by over 80% by providing structure.
And that's the key right there. Structure is the key. While we're on that point, why don't you tell me what a day of training looks like with you? Because obviously structure is a very important part of training. And in order to start training, you have to have a plan. So tell us what the structure of your training looks like.
Well, really, I learned from Mordecai Siegel. There's a book called Good Dog, Bad Dog. Check it out, the new and revised. And they talked about a crate routine. In that book, they have their tool preference. Now I have my own preference. I didn't take everything from the book, but the crate becomes a control if you're looking at it as from having a scientific approach. Whatever dog, whatever issue you have, just put it in the control petri dish, and that's the crate, right? And now you can navigate the dog through the territory. There's certain requirements. Put the leash on the dog in order to exit the crate. Now that's not really the training, but this becomes a structure in and out of the crate. And it's very controlled. And what this allows the dog to do is only learn what you show them, right? And then over time, the dog starts to learn what gets them rewarded. If it's food, attention, affection, toys, gets them what they need, just the food and water. That's the first thing that we start with. I give minimal affection and minimal treats in the very beginning. I just want the dog to learn back and forth, in and out of the crate. So we start off with a potty routine. Right, we pee and poop, then we continue the walk. And we structure that. If the dog's super poorly, we don't go on a very long walk because we have to stop a lot, do back and forth. And we spend around like maybe 5 to 15 minutes to start with, and back into the crate. Every 2 to 3 hours, you were going to repeat that process. That's the control.
Exactly. And I think that's really important too, what you just said there. Make sure that the time is very short in the beginning, because if you're trying to set a dog up for success and you think, oh, we're going to go on this walk, and my dog's never been on a walk before, and we're going to go for an hour and we're going to walk a mile and whatever, you're putting your expectations just like through the roof. You have no idea what this dog is capable of. And I also like that you said that you worry about the potty beforehand, because my dog is one of those dogs that will not go to the bathroom on a walk. He's too alert to everything. It doesn't matter if there's nobody around. It doesn't matter if there are no cars, no bicycles, no people anywhere. There could be a leaf, and that could be the thing that just sets him off out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So our walks start out, very, very small, and they transition into longer. And it's more about, allowing him to decide, are we done with the walk? Is it time to go home? Or, is he, his ears are flapping, his tail is up. He's got a happy face on, right? But as soon as those ears tuck back and that tail goes down, it's time to go home. So I think managing the expectation right there, like you said, is super, super important. And it's the routine, again, like you said. So I'm assuming that after you go on the walk, they come back and they go back into the kennel?
Exactly. Because without that, there is no consistency.
Well, and it's a signal too, right? You're starting and you're stopping. You come out, we're starting. You go back in, we're stopping. That gives the dog a chance to reset, which is incredible because I don't think a lot of people understand dogs don't know on from off a lot of times. They get all amped up. They're in their own little happy dog world, thinking their own happy little dog thoughts. And unless you tell them this is go and this is stop, they're just going to go all the time because they're dogs and they don't understand like social norms that people have, right? So you showing that very clear signal, this is the beginning, this is the end, and implementing that over and over, that's going to continue to reinforce that behavior and that cycle. And that really teaches a dog, this is the way that we do things. So if you're starting out that basic right there, how do you build up from that?
Yeah. So, the dog has to adapt to the handler, especially in a board and train situation. The dog has no idea what's going on. All the dog knows is it's dropped off and there's a strange person and it's in a crate, probably surrounded by other dogs who are also there for other issues, and they're stressed out and they're maybe barking or panting or you're doing what the energy is just, when you get a new group, that's how it is. But yeah, just potty routine in the beginning, just a simple short walk. From there, I like to start to hand feed. Some dogs won't take the food right away, and I won't use high value treats. Some people, they will. They'll start off with hot dogs, they'll start off with cheese. That's cool. But really, I like to tap into the survival instinct and start with the bare minimum because my basic obedience and everything, it all has a behavioral influence. So if I'm just giving my dog a bunch of different types of treats, I think that we can unintentionally spoil our dogs, even though our dog might excel with that in basic obedience. On a behavioral level, when the dog says, I don't want this, I want something else, and the dog won't perform for the food. So this is where we start to move forward. We had feed, I want to build food drive. If you give the dog anything else, even like a chewable medication, that becomes valuable. And a lot of dogs will spit it out. A lot of times I give the dogs a meds like a treat and they eat it because I gave it to them. And whatever I give becomes very valuable at that point. So teaching focus is one thing, but creating focus in a natural way is a whole nother thing.
Well, and I mean, I think that is something that a lot of people misunderstand about hand feeding is that hand feeding is an exercise in trust. Like you said, you don't force them to look at you. You allow them to. Because there are dogs out there that are not going to look at you right out of the gate, right? Like that's just how their instincts are. But if you allow them to look at you and you feed them, they're going to build up that trust and they're going to look at you. And that is going to be so much more special than forcing them.
Exactly. And, going from there, the dogs are going to learn, okay, if I stop at the door, I'm going to get a handful of kibble. If I go to the place bed, I'll get a handful of kibble. And that's what we want. We want the dogs to learn how to win this, right? And that's why we have this short sessions. But now the dog knows this. My 15-minute session, my 30-minute session, my dog's going to crush it. How can I make my dog better and improve from there? And understanding that if I go out to the park, my dog's going to not be as engaged with me, So I have a thing where, after my dog can do the 15 minutes, the 30 minutes, I start to push for reps, right? And if my dog can go beyond their normal amount of repetitions to the point where they're like, I'm kind of bored of this, I don't want to do this anymore. That's when you start to tap into the behavioral side of things and you can guide your dog with a leash. You don't need to correct, but See, when the dog starts to resist, that's a perfect time to start to introduce your little corrections, right? They don't need to be high-level punishment, because I believe that dogs don't know what corrections are or how to respond to them, because dogs aren't born with a leash on their neck in the wild.
No, they're not.
You know?
Absolutely not.
So as I'm still guiding the dog back, I'll add a little tiny pop. And over time, as they progress, the dog will learn that signal and start to redirect themselves, because we show them the correction, redirection, and still reward it. And it's all in leash communication and not necessarily for punishment. But when it's time to listen, it's more like, hey, pay attention, right? And it doesn't have to be abusive, because you taught the dog what this means and how to respond to it, versus just trying to stop a dog from not listening and I'll correct you and, I don't reward you.
Exactly. And I think this is another area that gets skipped over a lot in social media, is that training is a succession of steps. It's a succession of learning behaviors. So, you start with the kennel training and you start with the hand feeding. Put the dog in the kennel, you close the door, you sit outside the kennel, and you feed the dog kibble through the kennel. They realize that being inside the kennel is a positive thing. They get to have a treat just because they're sitting inside the kennel. They learn to be quiet. They learn to associate that calm behavior inside the kennel because they get rewarded when they lay down. They get rewarded for just, existing in there. You can walk away for 30 seconds, for a minute, up to 5, up to 10. You just slowly build that up, like you said, through repetitions, to the point where now they understand this is a good thing. This is how I behave. I wind down and I sleep in my kennel. But again, that doesn't get shown on social media. You get, my kennel trained my dog. Here's how my dog acted before. Here's how my dog acts now. Zero explanation.
Before and after with a social media influencer twerking.
You're not wrong about that. There's definitely some missing content with a lot of celebration that happens on some of these accounts. And while it's all well and good, and a lot of it is hilarious, funny, entertaining stuff. Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that don't have the money or the resources to get out there and train their dogs. So they look to social media for examples of what they should be doing. And then they fall upon these accounts that don't actually explain anything, which is not what you do on your account. And I see you in your stories all the time, taking dogs on a walk, talking about how this dog has progressed. And do you remember last week when we did this and the dog reacted to the bicycle and the dog reacted to that person and they didn't like the flag that was hanging on that door. And now here we are 3 weeks later, and this dog is walking down the street and its ears are bouncing and its tail is up and it's looking back to you for direction and waiting for its reward. And it's successfully going farther on its walk than it did before. And that's what I like to see when I'm looking at an account, because you are very invested in these dogs that you work with. And I mean, the video that you posted the other day, you're working with 3 dogs at the same time, 3 puppies at the same time. Like, that's just crazy to me. I was just like, oh my gosh, all 3 of these little German Shepherd puppies, they all just sat at the same time. Like, how long did that take to get that to happen, Mark? I would like to know.
They're 17 weeks old right now. That, they learn a little muscle memory because we're food luring. But, they're not really training there. That's more, it's exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But the training with them would come in, I really need to get them out individually. And that means structured routine in order to exit the crate, the leash comes on, but they're just so young. And we see that's me because they're my dogs.
Oh, I didn't know they were yours, but they're cute.
By the time they're 6 months, they're already going to be in routine, because these dogs are not just my personal dogs, but they are going to help me showcase my ability in training not just 1, but 3 working dogs, and they're all different, and not just obedience. Like, you could take a dog that's made to protect you, that's doing bite work. You got to raise the dog for this, but out to a restaurant and the dog be neutral and not think it has to attack everybody all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get into that a little bit because that's where you kind of have this new specialty is you're entering into this world of bite and protection dogs, which I have some personal experience with. I haven't really talked about this a lot with the listeners yet, so I think it'll be fun to kind of have this conversation because bite protection work has a lot of negative feelings associated with. And I don't think that there is anything wrong with having a protection dog or having a dog that does bite work. You know, these are natural things that are inside of the dog. They're instinctual. And when you work with a dog properly in these areas, you can really help your dog mentally and emotionally fulfill some needs that they wouldn't otherwise get to meet. So what do you look for in a dog that you're preparing to train for a work situation? And when we say work and working dogs, specifically in this episode, we are talking about bite and protection dogs. We are not talking about service dogs. We're not talking about dogs for mental health or a person's physical well-being. We are talking about dogs that assist other people for protection reasons, like the police or search and rescue, or just as an overall tool for a certain profession, not a health condition.
Yeah, well, what I'm learning to understand, like to choose a good protection dog is you want to have a dog that has mental stability, you know, a mentally stable dog, and a dog that has solid nerves. You know, one thing you don't want is a dog who's a little skittish. You know, maybe there's some things that you can work to on that, but if the dog's skittish, you know, on a behavioral level, the dog's probably more likely to activate when it shouldn't. If the dog's fearful and you put a bite on a dog, it's going to probably bite somebody out of defense when it's not necessary, or not defense, but because it's fearful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so really choosing the dog that is confident, is mentally stable, and has solid nerves. And sometimes you don't really know that off the top. You got to work with the dog and figure that out later.
Is there a standard test for that kind of thing, or is this just a feel of the dog kind of situation?
Oh, definitely you gotta feel it. You know, everybody, you can call it a test, an evaluation, but you know, there's certain things you see. You got to be very clear, you know, with what you're seeing. And you know, we had Yuri from Dogs on a Show come over to the field over when we were working with Smokey, and that's Vanessa's friend, and he had a Doberman, and we were told that this dog doesn't need bite work because it's fearful and it's skittish. And just from working with the flirt pole, the dog was like, you know, and the dog's a little older already. So if the dog's already biting people, you know, that bite work is probably something you don't want to do with this dog, because then it's going to do the same thing, but now have a really good bite. You know, you don't want dog grabbing on.
And that's the thing I think that people don't know about bite work is that there is a whole set of rules. There is a whole progression of training in bite work. You have to actually build up to the bite. You have to start with, you know, the very basics of, you know, even just the dog running towards the person in the bite suit. Like it's all, again, like with training, you're setting up a framework, right? This is where we start. This is where we end. And then once the dog actually does bite, getting that dog to let go is a whole nother succession of training. So when you get into that, how long do you guys, like when you start with the dog, how long does it usually take before you're actually beginning to end running like a full repetition of a cycle for a bite train?
It depends on the dog, but like my pit bull, we've been working with her for a year, and she's still on a sleeve. It's a hidden sleeve, but she's not on a guy in a suit. But then we got Bullseye's dog Riot, and he's been on the suit biting since he was 7 to 8 months.
Oh wow!
You know, so it depends on the dog and different things. But really, what I'm learning, and when you interview Smokey, he has a lot more to say and in depth and detail. But you want to develop the bite first.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make sure that you're learning those dogs' tendencies before you put the dog in front of a man.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
That's dangerous right there. in any situation. It doesn't matter if it's bite training. It doesn't matter if it's basic obedience. If you are putting a dog in a situation and you don't know how that dog is going to act, that's just a disaster recipe right there, because you're going to get bit if you do something to upset a dog, especially if you put them into a situation where you made them feel uncomfortable. So having a confident dog is an extremely important thing in the bite world and protection world, because I think you're right. My dog Fitz, he would be a terrible example for a bite dog. He is too fearful of things. He could not ever attack. I think that if someone broke into my house, he would probably just, jump in the bed or hide under the bed or whatever. He would never bite anyone. He's too afraid. He will bark at you and he will let it be known that he doesn't want you there, but you don't think he would actually ever do anything.
Oh, sometimes barking is better than biting.
You're not wrong about that.
Like my pit bull, she won't bark a lot. She'll bark for food, and that's her downside is she won't be a good alarm. Somebody's here. She's getting better at it, but our mini golden doodle, our micro golden doodle Rupee, she's perfect. When somebody's at the door, come back, and somebody's here. So, and I'm like, hey Bellamy, you gonna tell me somebody's at the door or not? But we go on to the time it is.
I think that's so funny in the difference between dogs, because some dogs are just, like, hey, it's cool, you're here, whatever. And people come over to my house and they're like, why do you let your dogs bark at everybody? Because if I don't let them bark at you, they're not going to know when to not bark when somebody I don't want is here and coming through that door. Like, they can bark at you. And once they realize that I'm fine, that you're here, then they don't have to bark anymore. And it's okay. But I'm not going to tell them, one, not to bark, because that goes against their instinctual nature, but also because it's an alarm system. It's a warning for me. That's a safety measure for me. And I personally don't mind if they bark. If you're upset, you come to my house and my dogs are barking at you and you're upset, you're at the wrong house. Sorry, but you are.
So, and barking, that means life. All my dogs are good. But then, excessive barking is a whole another
That's another thing. We don't do that. We don't do the excessive barking. But when people come over or somebody knocks on the door, I have a sign on my door that says, don't bother ringing the bell. The dog's already told us you're here, because that's what happens. We don't need the doorbell. We know you're here. The dog saw you as soon as you pulled up in front of the house.
But yeah, in developing the bite, and I'm learning that teaching the dog how to bite, or teaching the person how to fight properly, right? Before you put the dog into the situation, where it's going to face the man and it doesn't know how to bite. You want to build the dog up first before you present the dog with that picture.
So how does that work then? Let's talk a little bit about that. When you're building a dog up to fight, what is the first thing that you practice with a bite dog? So if you're working on the bite specifically.
Well, if you're working from a puppy, I haven't built a dog from beginning to end, just my dog, and now we got these 3 Malinois. But from what I'm learning, you want to temper those gums first, so when the dog goes to bite something hard, they're not going to bleed. And a lot of people, they won't do that. Smokey's old school, and he tempers the gums, and he does that with a flirt pole first. So you activate the dog's prey drive and teach them how to bite on something where they sink their teeth into. You always want to work on a full grip, right? So the dog's biting full all the way to the back, not just with the front, because you can injure a dog like that, especially when the dog goes to a sand on his sleeve and you swing them. You always want to make sure that dog has a full grip. So you work on that. The counter gets the reward, gets to agitate the rag a little bit. You lift the dog, relax the dog. But you go from the rag to the sleeve, and you're still working on that. But now the sleeve is a little soft. The dog has to really push in and hold on to something that's wider, So then you spend some time on that. The foundation is so important in bite development. Also, it's what I'm learning, how to do it properly from beginning to end and not skip steps or move dogs up so quickly.
Skipping steps. That's a huge thing. And that doesn't matter if you're in obedience training or protection training or bite training or just, your daily routine. If you
It's a
skip
life.
steps, yes, and life. As for, I mean, think about for people, if somebody doesn't teach you 1 + 1 = 2, how are you supposed to know how to do 1 + 3, 1 + 4? You have to learn the very, very basic fundamentals, and you can't skip from 1 + 1 to 5 + 5 without teaching the things in the middle, because then everything is lost in translation. And especially with dogs, because dogs don't think like humans do. Dogs' brains don't work like humans' brains do. Dogs don't understand that, we expect this behavior here at home. We expect this behavior in the backyard. We expect this behavior in the front yard. We now expect this behavior on a walk, in a public restaurant, in a doggy daycare, in all of these places, unless we step by step by step teach in every single one of these environments. So if you don't have a dog that doesn't have basic obedience, you shouldn't even be thinking about bite work or protection work.
No, definitely. It's always obedience first. If you got a dog you can't handle, some people, they'll get a dog and they'll never do obedience with it until it becomes too much for them to handle. Now they got a dog who, we'll say it's a good dog because at home they can get it with food, but as soon as the dog's out under distractions, they have no control. So you don't want to do so much obedience where you cap the dog's drive, and you can do that if you don't know what you're doing, but you want to be able to give the dog the right balance of obedience under control. And it's, when you're, sometimes it takes only one time to really ruin a dog, right? Over punishing the dog or reacting not in a right way to a situation, there's so many examples I could give, but I don't want to go off subject.
No, if you're fine. You can go off subject. It's totally okay. I think that, you have a really diverse situation here. You're doing training for obedience. You're doing board and trains. You're doing behavior modification. You're doing on work, on leash, off leash. You're doing all of the tools. You work with, e-collars. You work with prong collars. You work with flirt poles. You work with kennels. You work with harnesses. All of the things. So, now you throw in this bite and protection training on top of it, you really have the full package of what the dog world has to offer here. And I think that it's really important for people to understand that, we've said this is our motto: every dog is different and every owner is too. So you having the ability to work from very, very basic to very, very high up, which is like protection level, bite level, that's very high end training. Just kind of like, I would compare it to the list for the listeners to the dogs that do repetitive sports, like dock diving, trick training, things like that. Those are higher caliber dogs. Those are higher energy dogs. That's a massive amount of training and work that goes into those activities. And bite work and protection work is exactly the same thing. It just has a negative connotation with it. And it shouldn't, because it's still, again, it's all about drive. It's all about training. It's all about shaping the behavior into this very specific talent. It is not something that is negative unless you use it to be negative. You shouldn't be fighting dogs with it. You shouldn't be randomly having your dog attack people because of it. These are set for very specific reasons for, like I said, police officers, the military, personal handling, for protection of yourself. There's so many different reasons that you would need a working dog like this. The problem is that, I think where the negative connotation comes in is that they get misused, or they're trained for these specific jobs that they aren't actually used for, and then they're used improperly, which, if you train a dog to be a bite dog, if you train a dog to be a protection dog, and then what you're really doing is setting it off on your neighborhood kids, or, the guy that lurks around your sidewalk, if you're using it for those negative things, then that's how these negative associations are made, because you have this dog that's professionally trained to do something and you're abusing that, which is a way to abuse your dog. Plain and simple.
That a lot. I'm learning that too. Is you don't want to be doing that. your dog's trained and you're just turning your dog on random people, maybe you don't need that dog, because what are you teaching? What kind of example are you setting, not just for the people who see those type of dogs, but also, to the dog itself?
Mm-hmm.
So you turning on a dog on everybody like that, you're probably not very mentally stable. So, then again, that person doesn't need that dog, but they don't need a knife. They don't need a gun. They don't need,
Exactly.
they probably need supervision themselves.
Probably. And unfortunately, because there are not a whole lot of regulations on who can have a dog and how they can treat their dog and all of those things, this is where we get into those kind of yucky situations, and we get into bad situations where abuse happens or hoarding happens or just, miscreant behavior happens because we have these dogs that we've conditioned to act a certain way. And now what do? Can we come back from those negative situations? Like, you work in rescue, say you get a dog that's been trained in bite protection work, and it's ended up in a shelter because someone died or someone went to jail or something unfortunate happened, and now they can't have the dog anymore. The dog's in the rescue system. Mark swoops in and he takes this dog home. What do? Can you repair this dog?
Well, I can't give you a straight answer on that, but I can give you an example.
Go for it.
Well, there's this dog named Apocalypse, and me, myself, my team has really learned to love this dog. But this dog came to me months ago, young dog, maybe 10, 11 months, just with a lot of trauma, and so we're going to talk about the development and what we discovered about this dog later, like the second time around me training him. But this dog, it was wild on leash, just a big old horse puppy. It was destroying the lady's house. You put him, so you get a wild dog, but then you put him into the crate. He goes into a fetal position and starts to urinate and shake. And he would pee all over his face and his chest. And it's like, okay, damn, that is not normal. And so the dog maybe came to them. They took him from the shelter, and it had this issue. So of course I got about a month to kind of see what I can do to help start something so they can continue going home. I use a slip lead. I train the dog with e-collar, just showing the dog patterns, how to turn it off, trying to boost its confidence. And we got a lot done. The dog stopped peeing in the crate, and it took like almost the entire program for me to get the dog to stop peeing in the crate. When you pull out the leash, the dog would shake and curl and pee. So something about the leash and the crate in combination, the dog was just completely turned off. So creating a positive association to the leash, now, long story short, we got the dog off leash, but with good obedience, but the in the crate part was really the setback. And just to see him like that, so a couple months go by, they ask for a refresher, and he's losing a little bit of his obedience. Now, I train the dog and I know what I'm doing, but I send the dog home with e-collar and prong collar so they can manage the behavior. It's up to them to learn how to be dog trainers so they can develop their own dog and continue. So when I took the dog back, I ended up keeping the dog for 8 more weeks. And what I did, like, the dog didn't revert so bad, but the dog seemed to not like the prong collar, not like when it left going home. And when I put up on the prong, he wanted to growl at me, and I was, oh man, this isn't the Pox that I know, because Pox that I know kind of really likes me, and he was scared of the crate again. He licked his paws raw. So I'm just really like, I just really got stuck because the treadmill's not enough. Playing on the yard with him is not enough. And so I threw him in the van early morning when it was time to go do some bite work with Smokey. Me and Vanessa are rolling. And I joined the circle where they're playing with newer puppies, and they have the flirt pull. And I tried the flirt pull with him. He didn't want anything to do with it. He liked the bite pillow and he liked the ball, but not the flirt pull. So Smokey says, let me try something. And he throws the flirt pull away and comes with a short sleeve. And he just turns on, starts howling out of excitement. His tail's going. And then we were like, what is going on here? The dog was so good at the sleeve, you would not believe. And so now we got a really good outlet for him. It's just on a sleeve. He's not biting on a decoy. He's not learning to target body parts. And he gets to win the sleeve. And it's like, I don't want to call it a toy because it's not, but it is kind of like that for him. And so, Smokey's teaching me how to work the sleeve and work on him in the slack and work the dog on a back set. The dog is so confident now, 8 weeks later. It helped with the crate, because if the dog's going to come out of the crate, the leash needs to come on. And now we use the leash as a back set to tie up to the tree so we can work him on a swinging motion. And now he learns what the leash is for.
Oh, wow.
And he was so excited. And pit bulls, they sound like pigs. So it fired up. And she just texted me last night saying, Mark, my dog is doing so good. And she has the dog and it's laying in the crate, of course, with the leash on. And I taught them not to rely on the e-collar and not to work against the dog with the prong collar.
Mm-hmm.
But work with the dog, because he's so young and you don't know what he's been through, and he's in a shelter. It's like a young kid in county jail with a bunch of adults that are killers, and are schizo people that got issues. And you're just like, what in the world, where the heck am I? And then you get picked up by a strange family who doesn't know much about dogs. So then there's more fear and issues, and the dog will probably rather avoid it. So, developing that dog, the sleeve bite work became such a good outlet for him. I was able to help them so much, but now when I'm speaking to them, it's starting to click a little bit more. And, I get it. To have a big, powerful dog, and also it's very young, and it's barking, and it loves to play tug. And this is the biological fulfillment, right? This is what the dog actually needs to feel at his utmost. Not every dog, but this dog, it could be overwhelming. And the first thing you want to do is start working against the dog. So, I had them come over to work the dog and just playing with the tug and noticing like, hey, look, they seem overwhelmed with the dog tugging, So besides building the dog, also building up the handler so that they can be a good match for themselves. Board and train aside, I always work with the dog handlers because that's the most important part. It's not my dog at the end of the day.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that gets lost in translation a lot. I like that you said that you work with the handlers as well, even when you do the board and trains, because some owners, they send their dogs to board and trains because they don't want to deal with the training part. But what they don't understand is that they still have to work with the dog when the dog comes home. So they need to know how to use the e-collar. They need to know how to use the prong collar. They need to know how to use the slip leash. They need to know how to use the crate and the muzzle and all of the other things that they've been taught to use. But unless they are on board with that and they are willing to invest the time in that, they're not going to get anything, and they're going to come at you and say you didn't teach their dog anything, and they're going to be mad because the dog is regressing, and just not knowing that they're actually the problem is what the real problem is.
Yeah. Now that happens every once in a while. Like, we get a dog that maybe doesn't want to leave here because the experience was great for them, or we get other dogs that they're quick to go home because they know that it's maybe going to be free.
It's easier.
Yeah, easier. It's going to be able to do what it wants to do. So, when I do a board and train, I always have a 3-step graduation process that involves me really working on the dog handler. And I work the dog in front of the handler. Then I have the handler work with the dog under no distractions, mostly on my training field. Then we walk to the park and work out under distractions, and that's the test. And wherever the dog leaves off at, the dog has to learn at their own pace, of course, with a little bit of a push. We don't force the dog. Well, we got to encourage the dog, hey, come on, we have to do this. Then going home, that routine that I talk about, I train the dogs out of that routine, starting with the crate and whatever type of training you're doing. For me, it's mostly obedient, and then we got an element of bite work because I collab with Smokey. But plug and playing that system at home, and all you're doing is changing the environment and changing the handler. The routine needs to adapt with the handler, but it's pretty much the same in and out of the crate.
Yeah. And you've said this earlier too, that you have to adapt to the dog. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people skip over because, again, every dog is different. So when you're setting expectations in training for a dog, you really have to go in with no expectations because you don't know where that dog is going to land until after you hit that first end of the first session. And then even when they come back for the second session or third or eighth or whatever, they can go forwards and backwards. Just like we have good days and bad days, dogs have good days and bad days too. Some days they're going to get it and some days they're not. And I think as long as you are, continuing to reward those behaviors that you want to see and you're helping push that dog onto higher success rates and you're working with the dog, for the dog, not against the dog, like you said, that's where you're going to see the most success, the most change, the most adaptability to situations, because all you've done is continually reinforced this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. It doesn't matter what the situation is. So I really like that you offer that. And I love that you work with the owners and make sure that they can pass like the test with you there under supervision, because a lot of the board and train facilities do just train the dog, hand the leash off, hand up a piece of paper and say, here you go. These are the commands. These are the hand signals. And then they get home and they go, what was I supposed to do? I love that you walk owners through that. Now, I know you offer the 3 and 6 week board and trains. You offer the refresh and the reset courses. Do you also still allow private lessons after they've done a board and train?
Definitely. And I recommend that. If not before and after, definitely after, because it's one thing, like I'm saying, I can easily train the dog, and sometimes it's not easy, but for somebody who knows what they're doing, you just give me the time allowed and things are going to get done. But then the person who has to be the caretaker to this dog, if they're not doing things along the lines of how I was doing it, the dog can never adapt. So board and train doesn't make sense at that point. And that's really what I focused on when creating my own board and train program, my own take on dog psychology, a controlled routine, and what training actually is. My opinion, I needed that, because there's too many. It's like, how could I make my program just better than the next program? And so you have to listen to all the problems that the people have. And I've had people go from trainer to trainer to trainer, even the influencer trainers, and they couldn't help them, but they come to me. I'm either the first or the last trainer they ever need because of versatility.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, we're going to wrap up here on time here in just a couple of minutes, but if there was one message that you wanted to make sure got heard tonight, what would that be?
Don't stop training and trust in God.
All right. Well, we are with you on that. And I am so, so, so thankful that you were here with me tonight, Mark. And I really appreciate your take on all of this. I can't wait to revisit with you in about a year or so. I'd love to have you come back and really talk some more about the bite work and just kind of see how you've progressed and how you've implemented it into your training at Rosewood Canines. And thank you so much again for being here. And we will see you guys next week on Straight Up Dog Talk.
This episode is sponsored by Pet Matrix Premium Canine Supplements. Straight Up Dog Talk is super excited to be partnered with Pet Matrix. After exhausting several other pet supplemental brands, I am now seeing the results that I have always been searching for Toby and Fitz. Pet Matrix supports all 3 pillars of canine wellness using their Cell Matrix delivery. It delivers nutrition directly into the cell. If you're looking for a supplement that pairs with nature and science, look no further and get your dog on Pet Matrix today. Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited, produced, and co-hosted by Josh Wasta under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe to be sure you don't miss an episode, and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.